Fuck no.
Who wants his hands?
It's hard to get under 190, much less to 55 again. There's no way. Yeah.
Do you think if you had to fight, like, I mean, you're tall enough to fight at 170 now.
Oh my god, dude! You imagine if I fought at 170? If I was an amateur, yeah, I'd fight at 170.
Yeah.
I have a good record, man. I mean, like as a pro, the only thing I could do is like do what they do through Shamrock and just try to sell a bunch of tickets to have some bum fight me. But if I don't do that, you know what I mean? Like,
bro, Jesse Finney's catching heat back to back with Joaquin's podcast. This one, like, fuck. I'm gonna have to get him on one day.
Jesse Finney, good luck, bro.
I'm definitely a downgrade in regards to who you just had on your podcast, by the way. I'm sure you got a lot more views off him than you're going to get off me.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because I had a YouTuber on before that, and I got more views off the YouTuber.
That actually makes sense. Yeah. We used to, actually, funny enough, when I cornered Joaquin, we were in Chicago, and we met the guy from Fight Tips, you know. And Joaquin, like, fanboyed all over that dude. He's just like, oh, it's so cool to meet you. And I was just like, I don't care at all.
Yeah. That's funny as hell, bro. So let's get it started off. Welcome back to the Kickback Lounge Podcast. My name's Drew Young. Got my co-host in the building today, Max Young.
Yes, sir. One and only.
And then we got a special guest in the building, Erik Steenberg, a.k.a. Steel Mountain.
Steel Mountain.
A.k.a. Striking Viking.
Exactly.
What's up, guys? How's everybody doing?
Good, pretty good. How you doing?
Not bad. Not too bad.
Yeah. So let's get into it. I want to ask you, how did you get interested in, like, combat sports?
Well, originally I started doing karate at the YMCA, of all things, when I was a kid. Yeah. And that kind of pushed me towards it initially. And then after that, I did some like point tournaments, like think Karate Kid, you know, but like not exactly.
Which Karate Kid, the first one or the second?
You remember the end of the first, the very, very like first one that was like 1980s, and they're all, you know, the crane kick, all that stuff. Yeah. You know, it was kind of like that, but a lot more like protective gear. So have you ever seen like Taekwondo? It's very similar to that. Yeah. And did a little bit of that, and then. I don't know. It's not, frankly, I think it's great for kids, but like once you start getting a little bit older, I'm not a huge fan of it. Yeah. There are guys that have done really, really well in other combat sports, having done that first. Karate? Well, that style, that like point tournament stuff. MVP is a good example of that, right? He was like I don't even remember. He's done that like 5 or 6 times. Like he's a world champion in that. So it's useful, but I think it's more useful for children. And then I kind of got out of that, and I was like, I told my dad, I was like, you know, I actually want to box. And so my dad kind of helped me get introduced to a guy that he worked with, and I started training with him, and it was super off and on. So it was just spotty. And then eventually I got into a gym on my own, and that's when I really started training. And that was like boxing, kickboxing originally. Did that for a while. Had a pretty bad injury that kind of prevented me from being able to do that for a bit. And that's kind of what got me to jiu-jitsu, because when I came into that, I was like, oh, I can just lay on my back. I don't have to be up on my leg, because I'd broken my shin bone.
Really?
And that wasn't from fighting. It was from being stupid, to be honest with you.
Just doing some dumb shit.
Yeah, just jumped off something.
So how old were you when you were doing all this stuff, when you started, like around what age?
I mean, I probably started in boxing like 13.
13.
Yeah.
Is there a fighter you saw, or what era of boxing was that?
So we used to watch. So I remember watching Tommy Morrison against George Foreman. Okay. That's kind of like one of the first ones that I really remember. But like the Tysons, that stuff. My dad used to. I mean, not too often. They were really expensive, because even back then, they were like, I want to say they were like $70, $60. Like, you know what I'm saying? Pay-per-views, which is like still not cheap now. Yeah. And, you'd have Mike Tyson come out and knock somebody out in 30 seconds. And that was the whole thing. It's not like it is now. So now it's like, even these boxing ones where you pay for the pay-per-view, they have like a card. Yeah. You know, it's like MMA actually really changed that in a lot of ways. Like a lot of people don't know that, but like early MMA to compete with these like big boxing events was just like, we'll just show all of these fights. And early boxing, just didn't do that. It was just like, who's the main guy, and that's all we care about.
So they only had like the main event on there.
Damn. Yeah, you imagine paying for that nowadays. Yeah. You imagine. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Tyson,
you know,
like,
Yeah. I mean, I get that, but like at the same time, it's one of these things where it's just a lot of money to have. I mean, people were wanting their money back. I mean, specifically on a specific fight, I think he came out, knocked the guy out in 30 seconds. People were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but you kind of knew what you were paying for in that scenario.
Yeah. So that kind of inspired you. Were you trying to like imitate
fighters? I don't know. I mean, I was always trying to be slick. You know, I don't think I really had like a specific person that I was trying to imitate too much when I was younger. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, really, imitation started coming when I really got into MMA. That's where I really started feeling it. Because, like, as a teenager, I know, like, it's weird, but I talk to, like, most young guys or teenagers, they have, like, some guy they're clearly into. I'll give you an example. So, like, every time...
Could be over here.
Well, you know, like, every single time I've had guys, like, 5 years ago, coming to the gym, they were, like, a young... white 22-year-old kid, they're all just out there like Conor McGregor style. Every single one of them. And it's very clear like why you came to the gym. You know, it's like you saw Conor McGregor and now you want to fight, you know. Sorry. I didn't feel like that. When I switched over to MMA, that's when I started being like, okay, I see guys. I felt like it was more necessary in MMA too, because there's so like at that time it was so specific. Like it was still very like you're really good at one thing and then you're okay at something else and you're probably terrible at the third thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I saw guys and I go, okay, I can kind of copy that and I could see how that would work for me.
Yeah. You know? What kind of like MMA fights were going on? Was it still like the Gracie era or what kind of era was that?
So Gracie was like 93. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That was a little bit before me. I was 10 in 93. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I know I'm old. I can see his face.
No. I'm just like, damn.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was kind of like right when Chuck Liddell was like really popular.
Okay.
It's kind of how I would describe it. In fact, actually, I'll give you an example. I already had MMA fights before Chuck Liddell got the belt the first time.
Okay.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So when was your first MMA debut?
I think I was 19.
19?
18, 19? I don't remember. I'm really bad with stuff like that, to be honest with you. I was out of high school, but I was not out of high school for very long.
So you were like 18,
yeah, but just remember, guys, I repeated 10th grade, so you know, I was an old. I repeated 18, it. Yeah. I repeated 10th grade because I was not stupid. I was being stupid. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Poor decision making.
For sure.
A lot of people does it, you know, throughout the high school. Like I did it. I'm sure
oh my God, I skipped so many days of school in 10th grade. It was insane.
Yeah. Just like skipping out to.
I would sleep in my car. Like I didn't give a shit. Like I would just walk in and walk out the other side.
Yeah,
you know? I didn't have like a nice car. I wasn't like I wasn't like a Land Rover or something. You know what I mean? It was what was it? It was a cop car. It was a 90
Impala.
It was a Crown Vic. Yeah, it was a white Crown Vic with like it was a white Crown Vic with broken springs, and it floated like a couch down the street. You know what I mean? Yeah, so just this thing.
They used to let you leave campus back then.
No, you just snuck out the back door. That's
really?
how you get out of that one. Yeah, so I had to come in the front, go through security guards, all that stuff.
Yeah, where'd you go to fucking school, bro? I
went to Cleveland High School.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's closed now. It was on an episode of Abandoned. If you guys ever want to see it, by the way, that's like a Vice. It's like another Vice show on HBO. But yeah, it's an episode of Abandoned. Nice. They do the episode in St. Louis for schools because we have the most abandoned schools in the United States per square mile.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew that or not. But my school
Fun
is.
fact, guys.
Yeah, well, it's my school at the time. Had a lot of people in it, but yeah, it was slowly closing down. You could tell by the time I got there. But yeah, you would come in the front, security guards, go out the back, leave.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like today, I graduated. We both did, and we could leave whenever, you know, during lunch.
That's so crazy.
But now, we're not supposed to. But
yeah,
like,
you're not supposed to. You could leave, but like you're not allowed to leave.
Yeah, but
that's different.
Right.
Now they have like a big gate around the whole school. Nobody can leave.
They just have a giant like fence.
Pretty much. Yeah. Like they have a fence.
But that's also because like school shooters and shit. Like
I don't know if we got any threats, but like to me, I don't know. I feel like it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
But I just think Limburg has a lot of money, so they're like, shit. Why now?
We'll just fence them in.
Yeah. Fence them in.
Control them better.
You get in this education, we need those tax dollars.
That's super funny.
Now that's definitely like I would not want to be in high school now with like the threat of that shit. I mean, there's always been threats of like kids going crazy, but
that started getting popular even when I was in school. To be honest with you, like we had bomb threats.
Yeah, that was big back then. It was like bombings and stuff.
I'm sure it's gone up since then, right?
I would have to imagine. Yeah, I would think that is more of a threat now. I don't know if it's more of a threat. I think it's just more common that people know about it. Maybe
that's
you
true.
know what I mean.
So social media and everything.
Yeah, news and so forth.
Yeah. So let's see. So you get into MMA. How many amateur fights did you have?
9. Amateur. Yeah.
9-0, right? You were 9-0. Yeah. He was finishing everybody.
Yeah.
So what would you say is like indicators that let an amateur fighter know he should become pro?
I think the biggest thing that people don't focus on, and I'm getting too close to this, I can hear me popping it. Sorry, it's my fault. I think one of the biggest things is mental maturity. I think that's the big thing. I've met a lot of guys who are extremely, extremely talented, and then, they go out there and, can I cuss on this?
Yeah.
Okay. They shit the bed, frankly. And that's
as a pro?
Well, even as maybe an amateur,
okay.
They're not used to the pressure, right?
Yeah, it just crack. It's just that simple. Fighting's a weird sport because unlike a lot of other sports, most sports are team sports, right? There's very few individualistic sports out there, if you really think about it. You have a couple, tennis is an example. You could say gymnastics, basically, things of that nature, wrestling, so forth. But, really track is as well. But like for the most, even track, not so much because there's a group. Well, it's also a group. It's not the same thing. It's not everybody just watching you or just watching you and another person.
Okay.
Track, there's like, however many people, we'll say 10, I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? There's so many people going. Whereas, in MMA, or fighting of any sort, they're just watching you, And also, unlike a lot of those other sports, they're also watching you to see one of you get, fucked up, frankly. Right. You know what I mean? Like, people, I would describe, like, if there's 5 fights on a card, you know what I mean? And you're going to watch all 5 of those. I mean, you're basically looking for, most people would look for knockout, war, you know what I mean? Maybe a sub, and then maybe another war. So they're looking for, like, finishes and, like, violence, you know what I mean? And so that's a lot to cope with because you know that person wants to do that to you. And then going out there and having the pressure of, oh, I sold all these tickets, and, oh, my family's here, and, oh, that girl that is super hot that I'm into is here. You know what I mean? It's like, it's all of these things. And then you got to be able to go, you got to kind of shut that door. You got to be able to like close that door and be like, fuck all that none of that matters to me. The only thing I'm interested in is myself. Yeah. And that's why it's a very selfish sport. And that's frankly why I think a lot of guys who are a little more on that selfish side, if you think of like a John Jones type, there's a reason that mindset works so well. And the reason that mindset works so well is because I don't believe cares about anybody other than himself. And while that makes you a shitty human being, it can make you a really good fighter because you can turn everything else off. You're just like, eh. So I don't know. It's the same thing. Like what do they say? CEOs, like a lot of CEOs have like psychopathic brains. They're just not killing people. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with fighting. I think you kind of have to have, I know I certainly do. I think you have to have a slight lack of empathy. You know what I mean? And you have to have an ability to like turn that off. Yeah.
So do you see as a coach, like, I'm gonna ask you 2 things. Do you see guys with like that you can tell don't have the mindset for it, and like what does make the mindset?
Yeah. So yes, definitely. One of the ones is you can't be too much either direction. Meaning basically like you can't get the guy who's like hyper over aggressive. Those guys burn out really fast. You also can't get like the super nice guy. I'm sure Max has ran into this before, but you go and train with somebody. He does everything really good. If it's like, jiu-jitsu, he's killing guys. If it's wrestling, he's killing guys. Sparring, he's super technical. Then when you actually like start picking it up and go hard, there's this point where it's like, he's doing great. And then all of a sudden he's just breaking, and I find that like really, again, I'm not trying to describe fighters as assholes because they're not. I just think, you got to have an ability to be an asshole. And I think if you're not, and you don't have that trigger in you, I find it very difficult to make that. That's why usually when I take somebody, you know, I have somebody who's new, let's say, and they're coming in and, you know, they're hitting pads or something and just ripping everything on pads. And they're like, man, I just have a hard time stopping that. Like, I'd rather that a little bit than the other direction where it's like, I have to like constantly be prodding you to be, you know, to go, you know? And it's just part of being coach is messing with people's, you know, psychology, right? You're just playing this game of like, what do I need to do? So like me and Max, I think are pretty similar in a lot of ways. So when I fought, I didn't have a problem with my trigger. Like, I was very aggressive. The problem was the opposite. Like, I had to pull myself away. I had to be like, okay, relax. Like, you know what I'm saying? You don't need to, because it wasn't an issue of me feeling like I was going to go out there and not fight too hard. It was the issue that I would think I was going to fight way too hard and do stupid things. And so that's why, you know, when I coach Max, you know, I'm in his corner, I'm like, let's just calm down. Let's just be loose, that kind of stuff. Some guys are the opposite. Some guys are like, you know, let's fucking go. You know what I mean? Fuck this guy. He's not your friend. He wants to knock you out. Like, go out there. You know, he's going after your family. He's going after whatever. You just got to get him hyped up a certain way.
So. Like, one of my problems is, like, I get hyped up really fucking quick. Like, dude,
same.
just shake me a couple of times. I'm like, oh, fucking go. Dude, so, like, I have to be reminded. I was like, calm down, Max. Calm down. You know, just touch, move. That's what he did in my last fight, you know. We're in the back. Just like, Max, dude, you already hit hard as fuck. You don't have the power, put any power into it, you know. Just touch it. Just move. Just create angles, you know. Just constantly just moving and just relax. Just get in the flow state, you know. So that's my last fight. That's what I was focusing on. Just like relax, just move. You know, just touch him. Like, here's the thing. I know I'm faster than the guy. Technically, I'm just all around better than the guy. You know, he might be a little bigger than me, but I am physically strong than what my size is. You know, so I was like, this dude has nothing on me. So there's no reason for me to be like putting myself pressure on top of me. You know, there's no reason because I'm better than him every single position. Only way he can get into my head. Only way he can get better ahead of me is if he gets into my head, you know? Yeah. So I'm like, nah, that's not gonna happen. So like, I just like relax. It freaked me out a little bit because this fight, I was the calmest I've ever been. Like it's like it wasn't fearless. I was more like,
Zen.
emotionless state. Like I was like, if it hits me, it hits me. I don't give a fuck. Like, you know, like, am I gonna let him hit him? No, but I'm gonna fucking move and, you know.
But that's the best attitude to have. You know what I mean? It's like you almost want to get to the point where you feel the same as like how you feel on like hard sparring days. It's like you're not looking, you know, you're like, obviously I don't want to get cracked, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you're just like, I'm probably going to get hit hard once or twice, but I'm also going to be hitting guys hard today. And you just kind of accept it. And I think those are the days, that kind of day, and being able to mirror that day onto a fight night is pretty much perfect for, you know, most people. And again, you run into different stuff. You know, I had another kid had a kickboxing match, you know, recently. I have to play constant psychological tricks on him all the time to get him to do things correctly. You know what I'm saying? You know, as much as I don't like having to do it, it's like one of the things that makes you a good coach, in my opinion, isn't just the technical aspect, which I think I'm good at as well, but it is literally figuring out, how do I make this person do what I want them to do, you know, up to the best of their ability, you know? And that could be a million things, you know. Some people it's, you know, I had another person who had a kickboxing match, and some people it's like, hey, this person's not your friend. They're not your sparring partner. Treat them like, you know, you're trying to hurt them, you know. Some people it's the opposite. Some people it's, you know, I had a guy did a boxing a long time ago. Way too aggressive, always too aggressive, blows his load on everything. Everything is as hard as he can, jams his punches. And I'm just like totally the opposite, you know, hey, calm down, pull back, you know, stay at range, wait on him, stop overreacting, you know, so forth. So it's just, you know, playing with things. And luckily there's like not as many variations of people as people think, you know what I mean? For the most part, they basically fall into one category or the other. Too aggressive, not aggressive enough. And you just got to figure out what triggers them to be whatever direction you need them to go.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Do you think like a person's background plays into it, or like, I guess where they come from, how they grew
absolutely.
up?
No, absolutely.
The psychology,
Yeah, 100%, no doubt.
Yeah.
you know, let's just be real. You know, like boxing as an example has been the safe haven, if you will, for or the sport, if you will, for the downtrodden and poor.
Yeah.
You know, there's kind of a reason for that. You know, I think combat sports in general. I mean, you look at most of these guys. I mean, you know, George St. Pierre was a trash collector at one point. You know, wasn't super well off. You know, I just don't. I think it's hard. Was it Marvin Hagler? I think said something like, "It's hard to be a warrior when you sleep on silk sheets." You know, it's true. You know, it's his example was more, once you make a lot of money, it becomes difficult to keep pushing yourself to do things that are difficult.
There's no drive for it.
You have no drive. Why would you, right? You know, this is why you see a lot of, you know, Kelly Plavlik's a good example of this. He's a boxer, but he, you know, poor kid. I think he's from Cleveland, Ohio. You know, poor white kid in a black neighborhood. And he, you know, grew up, became a world champion boxer. Man, who did he beat? I can't remember right now. It's driving me crazy. He was an Olympic, the guy was an Olympic gold medalist, I think. And beat him, became world champion. I think defended his belt like once or twice, and then just fell off like super fast. Well, alcohol, drugs, you know, just you know, party lifestyle, all these different things. Yeah. And
I mean, it's hard, you know. Once like here's the thing, like a lot of kids that get, a lot of the kids, but like people that get into fighting, they have chaotic childhoods, you know. Like it's not
100%
peaceful, you know. So they don't really have a choice. Like this is something they grew up with. Then they don't have nothing. They come from a poor families and stuff. And when they do finally become something like a good fighter, big name, dude, they can't handle that pressure. You know, like it's all the party life, the alcohol, the girls, the money. It's hard, you know.
I think some of it too is just that it's just not even like the pressure. It's the
distractions.
Finally, I have these things. You know what I'm saying? It's that feeling of like, I haven't got. I was, you know, whatever. I was beaten up as a kid. Life sucked. Everything sucked. I'm in my 20s, and now women adore me. Yeah. You know, there's money. You know, I keep hitting the table. I can hear that. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. You know, women adore me. Money's coming in. You know, I'm on social media. You know, I have. You know, the tension. You know, 100K followers on, you know, Instagram. Like people like the stupidest things I post. You know, you'd be like, you know, good day today, and you get 10,000 likes. Right. You know, it's just like, you know, you're just getting this like affirmation, this praise. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's dopamine. And because you're getting this all the time, you know, it's hard. It's hard to go, okay, now I'm gonna go to the gym. And I'm going to grind out 2 hours of working out, you know, with a super hard wrestling practice followed by a bunch of pad work. And it's just like, that's hard to do, you know? Yeah. And I think that's the number one reason a lot of people fall off and have trouble. Yeah. You know, I think
look at Connor punching old men in the fucking...
Best example in the world. You know what I mean? Plumber's not a bad job, but he was a plumber. You know, I think he was a plumber's apprentice. Yeah. And then, you know, goes into MMA, superstar in the UK, you know, comes over to the States, you know, becomes a superstar super fast. You know what I mean? You know, 2-belt champ, I think he was the first one. You know, there's a lot of accomplishments. And then as soon as that hit, he has the Mayweather fight. Well, you know, the Mayweather fight, he makes, if I recall, it was something like $100 million off that fight. Yeah.
It's just from the money.
That's just different, man. Yeah, that's just different. You know, like I mean, you know, I'm no longer, you know, I wouldn't say I was ever really poor, but you know what I'm saying? We're lower middle class, and you know what I mean? So, you know, I'm doing okay for myself. I can't even imagine that kind of money. That's a crazy amount of money. Yeah. And, that's going to change your viewpoints on everything. I mean, at a certain point you just go, why am I doing this? You know, why am I getting hit in the face anymore? I don't really need to, you know, my brain's, you know, becoming, you know, jello. Yeah. And, I don't know. I think it'd be really hard. So it's always impressive to me, even with guys like Mayweather and stuff like that. As much as of a guy as a person, I don't think he's a very good person. To just keep that grind, you know, to keep that like want to keep, you know, doing it. Now, do I think he was like that at the most recent, like last 7+ years? Yeah. No, but prior to that, like I mean, he really grinded it out. He had a lot of money. I also think he's done with his money, so he probably just needs to fight to some extent. But
So getting into like you're talking about like coaching, getting guys in the right space. So how do you get guys right mentally? And like, have you ever what was like the learning process of that?
I failed a bunch at that. Yeah, so to be honest with you, like probably the hardest thing for me learning was how to deal with people, because I actually, frankly, don't think I deal with people really that well. I've gotten a lot better at that over the years. In my 20s, I was definitely, I mean, you can ask a lot of people who've known me for a long time. I've personality changed a lot. Yeah. I mean, Max has known me for a long time. I used to be an asshole. Yeah. I used to be an asshole. Yeah. You know, and I don't think it's gone entirely. I mean, I definitely had my times. You know, I definitely yelled at somebody Wednesday night. You know, it's like, you know, but you know what I mean. I think if you're a coach, you have to be a bit of an asshole, straight up. I don't think there's any way around it. You're never gonna get like these like that can come off as a very calm, like, hey, look, we need to sit down. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And at the end of the day, some people are going to appreciate you sitting them down and having that conversation with them. And some of those people are going to be like, fuck you, I don't care what you think. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. You know, not everybody's going to agree with you, and I'm not always 100% right. I'm usually right, but I'm not 100% right. And yeah, I just think, you know, coaching people is part mentor, part being a dick. You know, it's kind of, you know, drill sergeant and also, you know, uncle. So
yeah, you gotta find that happy medium. Like, I think you're good at it, Eric. In my opinion,
thank you.
Like, I don't know, you communicate with people like a lot better than like an average person can, because you can go in depth and detail what they're doing wrong, what they're not doing right. You know, I think that's why you're like better for me, at least. You're like one of the best coaches I had.
Thank you.
You can
That's a huge compliment.
Break it down. You can break it down. You know what's lacking. You know what I need to pick up on. So you do this. You know, that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
By you.
I think the other thing is too, like, like I wasn't I wouldn't say I wasn't athletic. I was athletic, but I was never a super athlete, right? And I had to contend with people who were very athletic, and so I think that makes you technical, right? And I think, you know, at the end of the day, the guy that you really want to learn from isn't the guy who, you know, this is why I say don't ever have heavyweights as coaches, you know, and I don't mean that across the board, but I just don't think that heavyweights generally make good coaches. And the reason is like, you know, a heavyweight boxer teaching you something, you know, a 6'5", 250-pound heavyweight boxer teaching somebody who's fighting 170 pounds, you know, it's just a lot less technical what they're showing you in most cases, because they're always at the top of the list. You know, they're getting away with certain things. Again, it's like, Tyson Fury is a good example. He's 6'9", he's almost 300 pounds. You know, and then he's like moves super, super well and loose and, you know, and just very fluid. Do you really think he can like teach that to a guy who's, you know, 5'8" and 150 pounds? Mm-hmm. Probably not, right? Whereas you take somebody who's smaller and he has to contend. For me, it's always the middleweight groups, by the way, even at a really low end too. Like I wouldn't really want to have like what is it, the straw weights, I think, in boxing or whatever it is. I can't even remember. They have too many weight classes. Anyways, outside of that, you know, there's guys that fight, you know, in the Olympics at right around 115 pounds. And it's like, that's great, but like you're not teaching. I'm sure you have really good technique, but at a certain point too, like you have to contend with like almost no knockout power. Yeah. So to me, it's always these middle groups. You know, if you wanted to do it in MMA terms, for me personally, you know, basically you have to be about 135 pounds or to probably 185. Much past that, I think you're just getting into kind of the ends of it, if you will. You're dealing with certain things that are at 125. They're so fast. They're so quick. They move so much more and they have so much less knockout power for the most part that I don't think a lot of their technique transitions to somebody who's like 155 pounds and vice versa. I think when you're taking, you know, Ngannou's not going to be coaching somebody, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
The
styles
it's just too far apart. Yeah, it's just too much on the ends, right? Yeah. I mean, the majority of your people, I mean, it's a curve, right? It's like the majority of people fall in that middle.
Right.
And for the most part, you want those middleweights to be coaches.
Makes sense.
And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, like I said earlier, I think you want to have your coach be somewhere in those weight classes and also somewhat not that athletic. I think if you're taking... it's why I would rather be coached by Bernard Hopkins than Roy Jones Jr.
Okay.
As an example. I think Bernard Hopkins is still very athletic. Obviously, he was boxing when he was 47. He was still a world champion. Yeah. I think that's because of other reasons. But but that being said, I don't really care.
Yeah.
You know, But, Roy Jones Jr. was always a fast twitch, open guard. Everything's just, like reactionary stuff. Does he do some things technical? Sure, but he does a lot of things that aren't very technical. And you can kind of see that because the second that he started losing his speed and losing his reflexes, he started getting knocked out by guys. Meanwhile, Bernard Hopkins, has a really hard guard to deal with. He's really sneaky. He does a lot of little technical things that are really hard to deal with. He also fights a little dirty, which I also think tends to be a little technical, frankly. But, he's a good example of what I'm talking about. It's like his longevity was much longer just because of that reason. So.
Yeah. What do you think the best style is in MMA?
Are we talking about like just one martial art? Or are we just talking about like a style in general, like the point to somebody?
Yeah, I would say a style in general because like if we're talking just like martial art, I feel like a lot of people would say the best base to have is wrestling.
Absolutely, I would agree. Yeah, as a non-wrestler, but yeah. I guess I'm going to have to point towards somebody. To me, it's still the boxer wrestler is probably the easiest one.
Yeah.
And the reason's this. Just look at all the champions, right? The majority of the champions fall into boxer, wrestler, basically, right? You kind of go up the line. You got like currently, I'm going to say these guys' names. Terrible because I'm the worst at saying names. Usman, as an example, boxer, wrestler. When was the last? Usman kicks here and there.
Yeah.
But what, like six?
He's like the ideal version of a boxer wrestler.
But but before him, Tyron Woodley, boxer wrestler. Before him, champion was Robbie Lawler, I believe. At that point, basically a boxer wrestler. He's more of a boxer, but like stopping takedowns. Even your guys that got. What is his name? I always forget his name. It was the same weight class, but it was right before him. He was champion. It was when I say Riggs, it's not Riggs. Anyways, this guy that everybody that everybody thinks beat George St. Pierre, and George St. Pierre won that fight. Remember that one? But even George St. Pierre, boxer wrestler. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You want to go to George St. Pierre again? What does he use? A lot of jabs. Yeah, a lot of jabs. He does some kicks, but his kicks are more like touch. Like he wasn't. He's got a head kick knockout, or basically a head kick knockout on Matt Hughes. But, most of his kicks, leg kicks, that kind of stuff. And they're basically to set up Superman punches to go into takedowns.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like a super heavy jiu-jitsu guy. It's not like these guys are getting a lot of subs. So, that's just one weight class. But you can kind of go down the line of that.
Yeah. Do you think that's why Glover Teixeira beat Jan Blachowicz?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think, I just think like, Jan's good on the ground. Yeah, Jan's really good on the ground. Exactly. There's levels. Yeah. But honestly, it's just a matter of again, we can play this game all day of like, oh, if you're good at jiu-jitsu, you could be on your back or on top, and it's just as equal. That's not true. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just frankly, top position is always better. So even if your skill level is exactly the same, if I get on top of you, I'm probably going to be having more advantage in most cases, especially when you start getting. If we're talking pure gi, maybe not as much, right? Because you got more grips, you have things to mess with. But like if we're talking no gi MMA gloves on, topside for sure is better. And it just doesn't matter if your bottom game is just as good as my top game. I can still punch you. We're sweating. You don't have leverage head back. You just can't do anything. The grips aren't there. Like your control is less. I can grind more. So even if they were equal on the ground, what separated them? Well, the wrestling, right? You got Teixeira's ability to kind of like come in and hit and kind of dip side to side. And it's hard to tell when he's going for a takedown. It's hard to tell when he's going to hit. And that's what caught him, if I recall. It's been a minute since I've seen that fight, but I believe he dipped in and like kind of cracked him, right? And then that's kind of what started the whole thing. I
don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a minute. I remember watching it when it happened, but that's already been... Dude, I watched so many fights.
I know that.
Some days it's hard to remember them all.
Yeah. So, how often are you like coaching guys or like going to fights?
All the time. Here's a good way to put it. When I go to fights, even in other states, I still know the state athletic commission people. Yeah, that gives you an idea. The last time I went to a state that I didn't know actually the people there was Arkansas with you. Yeah, because I know. But prior to that, if I'm in Kansas or Illinois or Missouri, I pretty much know all of the state athletic commission just because I'm at so many of them. Last month, I think it was last month. we'll say over the last 2 months, I think 6 of my weekends had fights.
Back to back too.
Three of them back to back. Yeah.
So how important is like networking when you're out there?
It's important to network with promoters. I think that's important. State athletic guys are great, but it doesn't matter really if they know me or don't.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just the promoters, just making sure that you're in like generally good terms with the promoters. I'm not like one of these guys who's like really big on like, frankly, getting on my knees and like, praising them. But, some of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, right. Like some of these guys,
they think they're the shit because they own a promotion. Like,
fuck you, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're renting out a goddamn, hotel. Good for you. You know what I'm saying? It's, or you whatever. Most of the, and when I say this, if any promoters are watching this, most of you guys are pretty nice guys. I actually don't have a lot of problems with most of you guys. Some of you guys are fucking assholes, though. The ones that are bad are really bad,
Yeah.
They do it for the money. They do it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. Like, I know some good promoters that are like, they take care of their fighters, if like IKF tournament I did, right? Like,
there you go.
I did that and I got injured, right?
Shout out to Chad Mueller.
Yeah,
really
shout
nice
out to
guy.
Chad. Yeah, like, they take care of me. Like, I didn't have insurance. That it was, they paid for the whole process of me going to the hospital, which is like not cheap, like probably $600, $700, like getting stitches and like they take care of the whole process, and they kept in touch with me, like, hey man, what's going on? Is your Then I had a bill. Then I called them about it. They're like, hey man, if there's an issue, here's a number to call. Just talk to them. If there's an issue, give me a call back. That's a great promoter. Like, but you'll run into some promoters that are like, you fight for them, they fill out bullshit paperwork. They're like, hey, I take it to this, right? And you try to give them a call back. If the people won't even go through, then you have to pay out of pocket. They won't take care of you at all. As a, for their fighters, they don't care. They just want you to fight at that moment. They're your friend at that moment. Then they're like, oh, you're done. You go get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
That's like. Yeah.
So what else would you guys say makes a good promoter besides like taking care of the fighters?
Organization's a big one. You go to, and again, honestly, to me, the biggest thing is literally what Max was talking about a second ago. Just not shady contracts, not shady stuff. And this becomes a little bit less of an issue with amateurs initially, but with pros, it definitely becomes an issue. I know promoters, I know fighters, I should say, who have had issues with promoters where, these promoters are taking more than they said they would or more than was agreed upon, things like that, right? And they're arguing over, $200, $300. I mean, it's just like, what are we doing, man? Like, are you really going to, like, burn a bridge with somebody who could go on to be, a top-level guy just so you can get an extra $200, really? Like, it's just, at a certain point, it's like, just cut your losses and just say, well, here's a good example. Let's say I sign you up for a fight, you fight, you come to me, where's my $600? I go, we agreed on $500. And you go, no, we agreed on $600. And I can show you the contract, and I go, hey man, this is $500. And you're like, that's not what I understood we were going to sign. I'd be like, all right, fine. I will give you the $600 this time, but hey, next time I'm going to show you it, and then that's what we're agreeing on. It's just easier to do something like that. It's not a big difference in money here. You know what I'm saying? But like, I mean, a lot of these guys, I know guys, like I said, who have been screwed over for $100, $200, $300, $400, like small sums of money, small sums of money. You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about crazy sums of money. You know what I mean? Yeah. I had to spend more than that on my truck recently. Like, it's just, look, I get $500 is not a lot, is a lot of money for most people. But just for context, guys, people who promote generally have really good incomes to begin with. So we're not talking about people who are poor. Right. You're not getting some guy who's making $50K a year who's making a promotion in most cases, right? You're talking about guys who are like making probably well over $100K a year, no problem, most of them. And so, $100 extra here and there just to kind of grease wheels, like, makes more sense than just like burning people constantly. Yeah. But, it could be a lot of things. Some promoters, again, like the guy in Arkansas we went to, really nice guy. Yeah, set everything up really well. Mm-hmm. When we were like, hey, man, we have 4 people. Can we have 2 rooms? He's like, yeah, I'll see what I can do. Got the extra room, no problem. Yeah. Very accommodating. Everything was great. It was no problems at all. He made sure we were good. Tried to have us back down. Unfortunately, it just kind of didn't work out. But, you know, a good example. You know,
great promoter. Like he was very friendly, understanding.
I think his name's Joe.
Supply stuff. Yeah, Joe. It was Joe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, supplied us things we need. You know, for the most part. You know, it was a new promotion. So you know, there's certain things like, you know, that was his first one, I think. I think it was his first or second.
Yeah, I think it was the first.
They just changed their name to Northwest Fighting Alliance.
Oh, so. That's a better name. I like that more.
Yeah,
yeah, they was Beatdown or whatever it was. Yeah,
like J Street Fights.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, Beatdown. Yeah,
it was Beatdown or something. Yeah. But yeah, yeah. I mean, supplying things, certain things, and it's funny because it depends like on what it is. Like you go to some of these promotions and it's like top tier stuff, and then they don't have like basic things. Yeah, you know. I'm not going to call any specific out because I do want to put my guys on certain fights. Yeah. But you know, I've been to ones where we're in like stadiums and they don't have mats in back to warm up on.
Yeah. That's
and I'm
crazy.
just like, I'm like, you have this huge location. You have a pay-per-view. You have all these things. And then like, we don't even have like a mat to warm up on. And then like stuff like I've been at one, I'll give you another good one, right? We were at a big promotion. And they did not supply gloves to the amateur fighters.
What?
I'm not kidding. I'll tell you about which one it is afterwards. I'm not going to bring it up.
Yeah.
But they didn't supply gloves to the amateur fighters. Yeah. And I was just like,
so they're supposed to bring their own gloves?
Yeah.
That's already
thank you.
That's
this
already
face
sketchy.
right there, man.
Yeah.
Because like think about that, right? Like what could you do to your own gloves?
That's a safety issue, bro.
That's a huge safety issue. And then the thing is, like the only gloves that we had was from another promotion that we had got because it just happened to be with us.
Yeah.
And then we put those on there, like, well, you can't use ones from other promotions. And it's like, motherfucker, then why didn't you give us gloves? Right. You know what I'm saying? Like at a certain point, it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So,
do you think in boxing it's easier to tamper with gloves?
No. I think it's harder.
Way harder. Yeah,
harder, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got to get. I believe they have to watch you wrap your hands. Yeah. And they have to wrap you. Sign it.
And again, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about like amateur boxing,
not as serious.
Probably about the same. You know what I'm saying? They hand out the glove to you. They put it on. They tape it, so forth. So not as much.
Yeah.
And it just depends. Most MMA promotions give you the gloves and then get the gloves back from you.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, you know what I mean? As much as I love the idea of like, I've kept a lot of MMA gloves throughout the years from fights I had because they were like, oh yeah, we just get them, sponsored to us for free. So just take them. Oh, that's great. But what stops me from just sliding a metal bar into my, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so to me, it's like, I don't know. In boxing, they take the gloves in most cases. In kickboxing, they take the gloves in most cases. Most MMA fights, they take the gloves. And I tend to think that you should just because like, it just is going to be less inclined to tamper with stuff.
Right.
Now, you might get the question, well, why would an amateur tamper with his gloves? And I think if you think like that, then you have no idea how crazy people who fight are.
Yeah, especially amateur level. There's some amateurs out there. It's more likely an amateur level than pro level, in my opinion.
I would say you're probably true.
Yeah. Because like amateur level, a lot of people that fight, they wouldn't be
Instagram famous.
Yeah, big fish in a small pond, basically. Yeah. They want the attention. They want to win. Whatever it takes, they want to win. They don't care about the guy's safety.
They're not caring about money. Yeah. That's the thing. Like
you don't get paid as amateur.
You kind of do, but you don't. You know what I'm saying? It's usually through like ticket sales. It's usually through sponsors. It's usually through those are the big two. But you know what I mean? For the most part, those are the ways you do it. You might do like other like weird stuff, like show up at something and somebody pays you to be there. Yeah. If you're really cool, But there's not a lot of guys like that, and yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's ticket sales for the average guy.
Yeah. So back to coaching for a minute.
Sure.
So how important is it, would you say, to have a coach that's a former fighter?
It helps a lot.
I think it's a necessity. I always like to say, fighting is not an X's and O's sport, right? I don't know if you know what the term is, but if you've ever played like football or basketball or anything, I do not think that you necessarily have to have played basketball to be a good basketball coach. I don't think you have to have played soccer. I don't think you have to play hockey, all these different things. I think you maybe need to have dabbled in it a little bit, but I don't think you need to have like done it. Fighting's not like that. There's too much nuance. There's too many things. There's psychology. There's so many things that you cannot explain to somebody unless you've gone through. It's kind of like if I went to the Marines and my drill instructor had not been like in combat and was telling me about combat training, I'm going to be like, you know what I mean? I just don't think it's quite the same thing. For the most part, like I said, I think in team sports, you can kind of get away with the idea of more of like the general strategy is more important than the individual. But the problem is that a combat sport like that, it is the individual. That is the only thing that matters. And so you can't, be like, well, just do a Kimura if you don't know how to do a Kimura.
Right.
You're not going to be able to like really explain all the nuance on a jab or a cross if you haven't done it. Now, do I think you have to do it at an exceptionally high level? Not necessarily. There's some really good coaches out there that I don't think are ever really were like top like level guys. But I do think it helps. And I think, frankly, you can see it because if you look at, combat sports in general, who ends up being the best coaches overall? Like, I mean, you just start going down the line to
great fighters,
like
usually.
Yeah, like great fighters or former fighters of some sort. For Asahari, he's always a guy I go to. I'm a huge fan of him. He actually commented on one of my comments one time. It's kind of cool. Yeah. He has no idea who I am, but anyways, but he's a good example where it's like he did, I believe he did Muay Thai and like kickboxing. He's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu, has a very good understanding of wrestling, trains all the time himself. And, now was he like some, super high level MMA fighter? No. But I do think that he has a lot of actual understanding and work with people and also experience to be a really good coach. You can even look at somebody like John Danaher, who's like kind of renowned for like not competing. If I'm correct, I'm not as big on the jiu-jitsu scene, but but that being said, he rolls with guys regularly. He's doing it regularly. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? It's not like he's on the sideline. He's just a fat guy and he's just like, okay, well now throw a jab. It's like it's not quite the same thing.
Most football coaches.
That's what I was getting at. You know, and Tyson Fury even is a good example. Like his dad, former professional boxer, that was his main coach. His next coach after that, I believe, was Emanuel Stewart. I'm way more knowledgeable in boxing, by the way. Emanuel Stewart was probably the best heavyweight coach of all time. He was also a former fighter himself. He coached the Klitschko brothers. He coached Lewis. He coached a bunch of guys, right? He has more heavyweight championship belts as a coach than anybody who's ever lived. He's actually, in my opinion, probably one of the best coaches in boxing of all time. But he was a former fighter himself, but he wasn't a renowned super high level guy, but he did it. And, I just think it's across the board. I mean, even when I look at something like James Krause currently in Kansas City, as an example, I would say at this point, he's kind of a former fighter. Who knows, he might come out of retirement, but he's really built that whole thing up. He's kind of built that whole place up as an example, and he's got a lot of guys coming out of there. But again, he was a former fighter. Just keep going down the line. I mean, the only guys that you can even kind of, well, even then, Jackson, Winklejohn, they kind of had a bunch of guys, but, Greg Jackson wrestled, from what I understand, in college. I could be wrong. Has a jiu-jitsu background. Winklejohn, former professional kickboxer, and those are the coaches. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've seen Khabib coaching, and then
hell,
Dustin Poirier.
AKA is a good example. I mean, all their guys, right? The Hispanic guy, the main Hispanic guy is the coach there. I can't think of his name right now.
I know he's on what though.
Anyways, from what I understand, former boxer, again, did it, has done some stuff with it, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like all of these guys have some background in it. It's very rare you run into a coach who's, you're just like, well, what's your specialty? Well, fitness, let's say. And even in those scenarios, most of the time those guys are, just there for what they're better at. You get guys like, well, I'm good at strength and conditioning. It's like, okay, what do you do with them? Strength and conditioning. What are you, his dietitian at strength and conditioning? It's like that's where they go. They're not the guy who's teaching them, jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So,
so what are your emotions when you're coaching? Like from the day you hear that like a fight is made for one of your fighters.
How do you mean?
Like, what's the emotional roller coaster like for you?
For me, it's kind of a slow build. Initially, there's no emotion to it. I might watch if I watch like a couple videos or something like that on a guy, I might kind of be like, I can see, this and this, or I can see things I have to worry about. And, you get the initial like nervousness, like, oh, I hope he does well. Coaching's hard, and I would say coaching is really emotionally and mentally hard just because as much as you don't want it to, I own a gym as an example. It reflects on the gym.
Shout out.
ES MMA guys. Yep. Come on out, free classes. Anyways, as much as you don't like it, it reflects on the gym when people don't do well. And it reflects on the gym when people do well. And it could have been your fault or not your fault in both scenarios. Like I could have not coached somebody well at all, right? Not that I do that, but I could have coached somebody badly for a fight and they still win the fight just because they're a stud.
Yeah.
I could also coach somebody like amazingly for a fight and they just mentally break or something. Yeah, shit the bed, man. Frankly, that happens, and I can't do that much about it. And that is incredibly frustrating at times because when I'm, again, I fought, when you think, man, it would just be so much nicer if I could be out there. Like when I see some of the guys that I know are really, really good or, vice versa. And all I can think is like, man, if I was out there, just crush this kid, what I'm saying? It wouldn't be a problem at all. And and it's like in your head, you're just like, it's just frustrating, it's just so frustrating. And, but you can't show any of that. Your job as a coach is to always kind of be removed from the situation as much as you don't want to be. You can't be emotional about it. It's kind of like if you had a surgeon, right? If I had a surgeon, let's say, and I'm going to get something done on like, I've had surgery on me, but let's say I've had to have surgery somewhere in like my actual torso that could kill me. Yeah. And my surgeon comes in, there's two of them. One comes in and he goes, I'm the best surgeon here. We're going to get this, appendix out of you. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be super quick. I'm really good. I do like 20 of these a day. I'm awesome. Right. Second surgeon comes in and he's like, well, you seem like a really nice guy. And I'm just like, not you, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'll take the confident guy. Yeah, I'll take the confident guy and I'll also take the guy who's just like, nah, you're going to be fine. You're good. You know what I mean? Barely cares. But he's removed, not that he barely cares, but he's removed from the situation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's removed enough to have that like ability to really have the views that are necessary. And I think when you're a coach, it's very easy to get like this real like tight focus on what you're doing to the point where you can't see the overarching things that are going on. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard. I mean, in the moment, you're closer than you'd like to be. Yeah. Personally, my favorite way to coach ever, if I could, would be have like one of those UFC monitors that shows the fight from the camera. Yeah. And then you could just hear me. Yeah. That'd be perfect because then I can really get a good shot of what's happening. I'm looking, you were in the corner for the most part. Yeah. You're looking at a bad angle, right? You're starting from this angle, you're looking up, you're seeing more leg and feet than anything. And you have to kind of decipher what's happening at this odd angle that's not like great. And then you have to, you have to be simultaneously like coaching in such a way that's simple. You can't overcomplicate things. I can't be, with Max, yelling out like extremely complicated stuff in the middle of a fight. And then the worst thing is like, usually what ends up happening is like, as one guy does better or worse, it gets super loud. And then all of a sudden it's harder to hear me, so forth. So I have to be yelling. And it's just, and that raises your emotion and everything's like, tense. And it's like, while that's all going on, you basically have to have this almost like neutered emotion to the whole thing where it's just not, you're just not there. Like you have to kind of remove yourself from it. And that's very hard because it's funny because like, Max right after he fought, he's like, oh, I feel so good. Yeah. Right after he fought, I'm just like, fuck. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like you're just tense. Like, cause I don't get to get it out of me. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no, like, I don't get to hit that dude in his face. I don't get to, you know what I'm saying? So I get all that build up in like nothing, it's like a non-finished hand job, it's just like,
so what do you do? What do you do after to release that pressure? No, like what's your like usually after a fight? I've been there. Like like the stress. You're watching somebody fight.
Yeah. He's got his methods.
It's I mean, I smoke a little weed, frankly, guys, but that usually helps. Usually, I mean, it's just a couple hours. Kind of I walk around a lot. That helps. It kind of burns some of that off. It's also relaxing and like, just telling yourself, you're like, oh, today was a good day, like things stuff. But at the end of the day, it's hard because you do go home and you have like that tension, and, it just keeps you up and whether you like it or not. And again, that's why it's like, you need to remove yourself from it as much as possible. For your coach, like being an emotional coach. And I mean, I have this problem. I know I have this problem. I'm sure people see me in the corner and I'm yelling and you see me cussing and so forth. But I try not to. I only get to that when it starts becoming like very clear you're not listening to what I'm saying, or very clear that you're like on the losing end of stuff. And I'm like, no, we need to like, I need to get you. Yeah. Oh, fine, dude, it's the worst. Yeah. It's the worst, man. It's like, I don't know. it's like being you ever seen those ring things or whatever they call them, like the security cameras inside houses, right? Mm-hmm. It'd be like you're sitting at your office and you have to stay at work and you have like 2 dogs and they're just tearing your house apart. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, you're yelling through the thing. You're like, stop it. And they're just like, nah. They're like, we'll deal with these consequences later. And knocking over your big screen. You're like, fuck. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It's like this like distance thing where you're like, you could do something about it after, but you can't do anything about it right now. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So your hands are tied. Basically.
You're just tired. Yeah, it sucks. And it's, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like, imagine it's like, getting kidnapped and getting like tied up and they're beating up like, somebody you care about. You're just like, quit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's rough. It's hard.
Yeah. So how is it when your fighter loses or like you see him get rocked? Just like
I mean, it's nerve wracking. Your heart drops. Yeah. When you see somebody like you've trained, especially when you're with somebody for a long time, if you've just been training, I mean, not to sound like this, but if you've just been training somebody a year and a half, that's one thing. You've been training somebody like 4, 5, 6 years, like them pretty well.
Yeah, they're like your friend, like you're
I would say they're more like it's almost like brothers. Yeah, like it's how I would describe.
Like you said, uncle.
Yeah. It's like family at that point because it's kind of like I don't know. I mean, me and Max spar. We've been sparring off and on forever. We've done. We've been. It's similar to what I imagine the military's like, right? It's you go through these grindy things. I said this about Ryan, actually. I think I wrote this after Ryan passed away. And it was basically, once you've really grinded yourself through something with somebody like that many times, and you've had that same experience that many times, it really bonds you to that person in a way that you don't get bonded to like a lot of other people. Yeah. And I think that's the same reason that like military guys have that feeling for other military guys. If you had somebody in your platoon, let's say, and you're getting, even if you just get posted somewhere in Afghanistan and you're just working on trucks or something, I still feel like you're getting this unique experience that other people don't get. Yeah. And I don't think that you can get that, other ways, and I in a lot of ways I think it's very, very hard for, and I think that's something that's like almost exclusive, that like males have the males or females have the females. I think that doesn't necessarily cross as much. It does sometimes, but I feel like again it almost makes it feel like they're like a relative. Yeah, and so it's like you guys can disagree, you guys can not like each other in a lot of ways. There's people that I've trained that I didn't like. Yeah. There's people that have trained with me that didn't like me. Yeah. I know that. And but at the end of the day, it's like you'll still see each other at some place and you'll be like, hey, and you'll have a conversation, and and when they fight, you hope they do well and so forth. So, I think it's just something that's built up that the average person can't understand unless they did it, Yeah. And it sounds like real
it makes sense.
But
so I don't want to get you in trouble at all, but like, how different is it training a female fighter versus a male fighter?
I don't mind talking about that. That's fine. Mm-hmm. The difference between like males and females generally, this isn't always the case, and this is going to be dependent upon if they did sports heavily through grade school, high school, and college, right? I'll give you an example. I had a female that I trained. She trained. She played basketball basically like her whole life, right? She was on select teams, whole 9 yards. She was in college, if I recall. She played in college. When I got to her, it was like training a guy. You know what I'm saying? It was no issue. If I told her to do something, she does it. You know what I mean? It's no like, she's not like getting upset, so forth, right? Yeah. And by the way, what I'm about to say, afterwards I'll explain this. What I'm about to say about females also applies to guys if they've never had these same things. I think the difference is between them is that generally speaking, men are exposed to physical hard physical activities sooner than females. And I think that a lot of females don't have that same activity in their life unless they had like a lot of brothers or they did a sport that was like pretty rough, which there's just not a lot of sports like in high school that are very rough for females. I think if you had a girl like, let's say, who wrestled on a wrestling team, through high school,
did like rugby,
rugby or something like that, and then they come in, it's a little easier. You know what I'm saying? Let's be real, because they're used to getting. It's two things really. It's the impact, that first time getting impact, and you see this with like little boys, right? There's some soft little boys out there, frankly, you know, and they'll be like 11, 12 years old. And the first time, you know, let's say they're even 13 and, you know, their parents are like going up, start sparring or something like this. And I don't do this, by the way, but you'll see like some gyms that'll just like push kids, you know, oh yeah, just, you know, go out there, you know, and they'll get popped. And like the second time they get hit, they're crying, you know? You know, you see that even with little boys, but you see that especially true with like when women, like let's say you have a 23, 24-year-old woman who's never really had like a really hard impact of any sort in her life, you know, through sports or activities, and isn't used to having somebody yell at them to do things correctly, you know, in a sport or activity. And then what happens is, you know, they come in, they do, you know, the basic classes and stuff. And then the first time they have to do like a blocking drill, or they have to do a drill where they actually get some hard impact and they're not used to it. They you know, they get that like shock and almost like, you know, like, ooh, you know, that shot of emotion, and, you know, they'll be upset or crying and so forth. And again, I deal with that with some guys too. You know, you get guys that get hit once and they're like, whoa, you know, they're, they're just trying to get away from everything possible. And it's like, you know, I'm not saying you should want to be like, you know, head down, like, yeah, I love it. But at the same time, you know, there has to be a certain amount of just like, I understand what this is. And it's not, you know, again, what's the average, if you think of the average person coming in and how do they describe fighting, you know, like, well, if I got in a fight, I would just throw like this, and then I would do this, and then I would do this. And it's like, that's not how anything works. You know what I'm saying? It's not you do this. It's I'm going to try to do this, and this guy's probably going to do this other. And it's like there's never any thought of the other person. And I notice that a lot with people who are brand new, and girls especially, where they come in and they're just like, well, you know, they'll see a fight and they'll just be like, man, she looked terrible. I think I could, you know, kick her ass. And then they go out there and they get like stomped. You know, and it's just like, well, you know, a little easier than you think. And again, I see this with young 20-year-old guys too who have never really been checked, if you will. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, any other thing, the difference between male and female fighters, in my opinion, is, and it just, again, depends. But the biggest thing is how you have to talk to them. You know, generally with guys, you can just be a little more like direct and blunt. Girls, it depends who they are, but you kind of have to play a little bit more of the psychological aspect, where it's just got to be like, hey, like, it's how you present things is important. You know what I mean? And, you know, and everybody's different. You know, at the end of the day, like, you know, I have girls that I train that I think have way stronger mindsets than guys that I train. And I can just be like, no, you did this sucked. Like, I could do this to them right after they fight and lose. Like, they could lose a fight, and I could still be like, this didn't look good, this didn't look good. And they'll be like, yep, I understand, I totally agree.
Is that hard to do generally? Know? If, like, somebody, say, loses a fight, is it hard to, like, get it through their mind, you did this wrong? Or yeah, it can be. It depends on the fighter. You know, this is the game. The older I get, the more I realize. So, like, there's basically like two types of skills in life. There's hard skills and soft skills, right? Hard skills are basically like, I was good at fighting. As an example, that's like a hard skill. I'm a decent artist, right? That's a hard skill. Let's say, you know, I don't know, like, you know, Max is really good at working on trucks or cars or something. That's a hard skill. You know, you're good at computers, let's say. That's a hard skill. Soft skills are like interpersonal stuff like this, like your ability to communicate with people and like, and do things of that nature, right? More social stuff. And being good at like soft skills like this is important. I realize a lot more, and it took me a long time because I have such like I don't have a knack for it. You know what I mean? It took a lot of work. And, but my interpersonal skills have really improved over the years. And the reason it's improved so much is basically because I wanted to be a better coach. And I started to realize that if you can't convince people to do things, it doesn't matter how good you are at coaching. It doesn't matter if everything I say is correct. If I'm going to turn you off to everything I say right away, it just won't get through. So again, it's that psychological game. You know, you're always playing that game with them. You know, and it's kind of mind chess. You know what I'm saying? And it's Shout
very
out to chess, man.
Yeah. You started playing chess over that period. Now you're addicted, aren't you?
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
But
so when you were talking about the hard impact, is that like a one-time thing? Like the initial, I'm saying the initial, like, I guess reaction? Shock. Yeah, you were talking about, or is that like every time you get it?
No, it's less and less. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's built up, and to be fair, like, you know, hell, I think the first time me and Max sparred recently, when he first Came back, this was a while back, but like, you know what I'm saying? He cracked me, you know what I'm saying? And I hadn't been like really hit in a while. And I was like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, and it wasn't fun, you know, by any stretch, but it had been a minute. And I had that like later that day that like, whoo, you know what I mean? You have that feeling of almost just like, man, I got popped, you know? That's hard to deal with. And, you know, and again, I started pretty young and I have a lot of years of getting hit in my face, unfortunately. Yeah. And still you can get it, you know, you can get that, but it is overcoming it, you know, and then like in the Navy SEALs, they like tie your hands, tie your feet and throw you in water and like swim. Right. And you can panic and you can make it to where, you know, you drown yourself when in reality you can be just fine. And it's like, it's kind of that stuff. It's like, you're going to get popped, but you also have to have that, like that hardened mindset in the back of you. You know, I always think of like, it sounds like such a weird metaphor, but I almost think of like your brain, like you almost have this, like this metal ball in there, if you will. And it's like, at the end of the day, no matter how much like things get bad, I know that like that center of me, that hard part of me in my mind, that really, really like dense part of me is just not going to give up. So like, as long as I have that in me, I know that I can like push through things, you know what I mean? I'll blow out all four, you know, both of my knees and my elbows, you know, and, you know, get knocked unconscious and I'm still going to try. Yeah. And I think the problem is that a lot of people don't necessarily naturally have that. Yeah. And I think it's something you need to build up. And I think some people get hit really hard and they just quit. Yeah. They're just like, no, I'm good, which is fine. You know, modern day, you really don't need combat sports that much. Hate to be that guy. I coach, but I don't at the end of the day think it's that necessary for most people. And I don't think it's for most, I wouldn't say for most people. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. And the level at which like Max does it, or I used to do it, or some of the guys that train there, it is definitely not for most people. You know, most people do not want to do 20 minutes of wrestling. Most people do not want to do 20 minutes of jiu-jitsu. Most people do not want to do 20 minutes of live sparring. I can promise you, as much as you know, if anybody's watching this and they think, well, you know, I've never done it before, but blah, blah, blah. I can promise you really don't want to. I had two new guys try jiu-jitsu the other night, really nice guys. You know what I'm saying? But they were gassed in 5 minutes. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know, you know what I mean? And it's brutal. Now they came back, you know, and they have a great attitude. So it's like, they're going to be fine. But my point is that like, you know, those guys were not in bad shape. They're both bigger dudes and they were a bit wiped, you know, and if you don't have that mentality of like, yeah, I'm going to get beat up for a while, but I'm going to get through it. If your mentality is coming in is, oh, I'm going to dominate, you're going to get a reality check. And most of the guys that think like that early generally get reality checked real quick. Yeah. And then what ends up happening is they quit, you know, and that's with girls too, guys and girls, you know what I mean? Across the board. So
we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but, compared to other sports, how important is like film study for MMA?
I think it's pretty important. I think you can overdo it. You know, one of the things for me personally is I tend to think that amateurs can definitely over film study. Okay. And the reason is if like Max is fighting some guy and we look at like, you know, he has like 20 fights, let's say, and we look at all of his fights and we can kind of progressively see things. At the end of the day, you pretty much just got to go, okay, he's good at like these 5 things. Okay. And you're good at these 5 things. And then we just need to make sure that you're aware of those 5 things. And then you need to apply these 5 things that would work against them. That's 90% of fights. Yeah. You know, one of the things I tell guys, amateurs especially, think of, you know, I really believe this. Like I used to do this for myself. Make a list of 5 things you want to do in your fight. And then make sure you do those 5 things. And you'll probably win your fight. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10, you're going to win. You know, if you just follow the game plan of what you're trying to implement, you'll probably win your fight. You know, let's say you're a wrestler and you got like, okay, jiu-jitsu, not very good stand-up. You're an amateur fighter. So you're just like, well, I want to be able to push the pace, right? High cardio, right? So that's one. I want to be able to like set up my takedowns off strikes, right? So you train that the whole time. And then you make sure you do it in the fight. And then you're like, okay, well, the other guy is a better striker than me. You know what I'm saying? So what do I need to kind of avoid that? Well, you need to avoid that by basically, you know, when you strike, you always show like you're going for a takedown after, or you show like you're going for a takedown and then come up to strike. This way he's always in this series of feeling like he has to adjust for the takedown, right? So that's an option. You know, you just kind of go down the line. I mean, I'm not going to make up like a whole game plan right now, but my point is that like, you know, you just got to write out, you know, 5 things. And it could even be simple stuff like, make sure I stay calm and back. You know, make sure that I'm mentally focused. You know, make sure that whatever I'm doing, you know, it could be goddamn it. I did a lot of yoga to make sure I was, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Whatever your thing is. But my point is, like, if you generally will do those 5 things and implement those 5 things, most of the time you'll have a successful fight. And I used to do that for myself all the time. And a lot of times it would be like 3 to 4 things that are like pretty technical, and then one thing that's more like a motivational thing. Like, make sure that I'm, you know, doing XYZ, or like make sure I'm mentally like in the moment, or make sure that, you know, I told this to one of my other people who fought recently, and you know, I was saying to him that I don't want people who, I think that fighting kind of benefits stupid people. And the reason I think that at times is because I think you can get too cerebral on what you're doing. So when you're very frontal lobe and you tend to think very far ahead on what you're going to do, I think it puts you in a scenario where you tend to think about the overall fight as opposed to like the next 10 seconds. Yeah. And so I was talking to him, and I was basically like, look, like, you need to get in the mindset of like, everything's a 10-second, you know, period. Like, you just need to focus on these 10 seconds and then focus on the next 10 seconds. You know, some people can't be in the like, Max is really good at being like present. Like, he is in that moment. He is just looking. He's, you know, he's predatorial, like in the cage, you know, not outside of the cage, of course, guys. Sorry. That made me sound bad.
Just in the cage, guys.
Just in the cage, guys. Just in the cage. But that being said, you know, he's very present on what's happening. You know what I mean? He's very aware. He can, you know, he's looking and so forth. You can see when people are looking at the end of the round, or they're looking at the end of the fight already. You know, they go out there and they're already just like, okay, like, I just need to do these things and blah, and they're just like, they're elsewhere, right? They're not. You got to get them zeroed in on what's happening right this second. You know, not the before, not the after. And I think that people who are a little more intelligent, unfortunately, have a harder time with that. You know, because they're.
So you call me stupid, Eric?
No, not at all. Because here's the thing, I used to be really good at focusing in right on the moment as well, and I don't think of myself as a stupid person. I think it's just something you have to practice at. I just think that if you are stupid, if I'm honest with you, well, you know, maybe not even stupid, but if you're just a little bit like dumber, you know what I mean? Like, or even average. Like, if you're a little more average, if you're very smart, I think you tend to think long term. I mean, this is why, you know, let's be real. You know what I'm saying? You think of like people who make a lot of money, or people who make like companies. I mean, those things don't happen overnight. Those are long term endeavors, right? And those are generally smarter people that do that. Well, smart people tend to think long term, but they also tend to be bad at being present immediately here. And I think that it does benefit you a little bit if you can kind of be stupid. You know what I mean? Even if you can just make yourself a little dumb at times, like like think more in that like not maybe more animalistic is a better way to put it. Like, you just got to be more here right now and what's happening. And I think that's hard to do. And that takes practice. And you know, and some people can do it, some people can't. So
basically, have a game plan, like an overarching game plan, but like also be present
100%
in the moment.
Yeah, you know, your 5 things are great and everything, and if you implement them, but they're not like,
you shouldn't be thinking about them like during the fight. No,
that's why you write them down. That's why you go over them every night, to where it's second nature. Again, anything you can do to make it boring. You know, I think I told you this, but like, the more boring your fight is, probably the better you did. You know what I mean? You want things to feel almost dull by the time you're out there, where it's just like, this is just the same thing. This is nothing different. It's just somebody I don't know. That's it. That's the big difference between the whole thing. It's just a guy I never trained with. That's it. And I think if you can do that, that helps a lot too. That mental like feeling of almost like dullness when you fight. It used to help me at least. And again, it depends on how you are. You know, some guys like to really be in the moment, be real loose, like almost like they're showing off, which I think is, you know, important if that's kind of your personality type. I think for somebody like me, it was more just like, okay, business as usual, you know, and I go out there and we're just like, you know, I'm not looking to like not look good, but simultaneously for me, it's just like
the W.
Not even just the W. It's just like you see what works and then you do it immediately. It's just applying the correct thing at the right moment constantly. It's just doing that. It's like, you know, it's like a game of Tetris. It's like, you know, there's this shape and it fits here. There's this shape and it fits here. There's this shape and it fits here. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's just these very quick little tasks that you have to constantly be dealing with. And that's kind of how I think of dealing with fighting, is just like this constant, like small math problem, if you will, you know? and you're just dealing with these little things really quickly. And that's where being present is important, because if you're thinking about 15 minutes from now and you're getting these little, you know what I'm saying? You're almost multitasking. I feel like that's the issue. Like they're almost doing this multitask of like, well, I have to deal with this right now, but I also have to deal with this thing. And it's like, stop thinking like that. Yeah. You know, so.
What advice would you give to an amateur fighter?
Get into a good gym, get a good coach. Don't be lazy. Listen to what they tell you to do, even if it doesn't sound like necessarily always the best advice. It's probably the best advice for you. You know, that's something that a lot of guys don't do is, you know, guys, if you're 18, 19, 20, 22, you know, whatever, early 20s in general, and you have I heard somebody say this the other day. If you're 20 years old and you're going to give life experience just to people, or you're going to give advice to somebody who, you know, or you're going to argue with somebody who's been doing something for a really long time, and they're significantly older than you, like, nobody cares what your opinion is. Like, straight up. Like, unless, like, it's all relative. Again, Max has been training for a long time, you know, even though he's young, right? So he has, like, a lot of experience, realistically, you know. So if Max gives somebody advice, even if they're the same age as him, he's technically, at least if you want to look at it from the perspective of training age, he is much older than they are.
Okay.
And wiser. That's a good way to think about it. And so when I tell somebody to do something or something they should be doing, and your immediately reaction is, this one I hate, by the way. I know this is something that a lot of younger guys do, but it's the I know.
Oh, yeah.
No, you fucking don't. You know what I'm saying?
You've been doing it.
That's the worst. Just in life.
I hate that. I hate it. But yeah, I would say, you know, listen to your coaches, really, try to respect the process. Understand that, like, if a coach does, here's another one. If you go to a gym and you ask, like, how soon I can fight, that's usually an insult. But the second thing is, if they give you an answer of like 2 to 3 months, that's not the right gym. I can tell you that right now. You should not be training places that are throwing you in with no experience and no background into fights in a 2 to 3 month period. Just flat out. You know what I mean? So,
what about when guys are like, they're like want to fight so bad, and then the coach says like, no, like, don't fight yet? How important is that to listen to your coach?
Extremely. Yeah, it's extremely. I'll give an example. There's a guy who just came to me not too long ago, has a really pretty steep background in wrestling, wanted to know how fast it kind of takes to get to those points. And, I basically was like, look, like, realistically, you could probably go out and you'll probably win your first match. Like, I could probably get him in a fight right now. In an MMA fight, he's, 0-0, and he'd probably beat the first guy he faced. He'd probably win, right? The problem is, it's not quite like boxing or even kickboxing, where you have these really, like, long pedigrees building amount of fights, right? So it's like there's not as many, like in boxing, like if you're turning pro, like a low amount of fights is usually like 50, 60 amateur fights, right? You're not doing that in MMA. A lot of fights in MMA is like 10, like as an amateur before you go pro. So the thing is, you have this really fast S curve coming up to competition, right? So this is the issue. Now you have your first fight, you win your first fight. Cool, gravy trains, right? So now you're on this little train up, right? And then you have your next fight, right? And maybe you win that one too, right? You're a college wrestler, who knows? You probably win that, right? Yeah. So then you get the next one. By the time you're like 2-0, you're starting to face guys, unless you sell a lot of tickets, and unless you have a lot of sponsors, in which case promoters will bring you in, and they'll bring in terrible fighters to lose to you. But unless you're that guy, what's going to happen is you're probably going to start facing harder opponents, or you're not going to get opponents. One of those two things. So then you face somebody who's actually decent, can stop a shot, right? Or gets taken down and can get back to his feet and just doesn't get smothered for 9 minutes. Gets back up, you gas, all of a sudden he's starting to beat the hell out of you. You take an L, right? Problem is now you have 3 fights. It doesn't matter that you lost that last fight. They don't care. Now you're going to be facing other guys. You're still on this trajectory. And I've seen this where, you get guys who have lots of losses. It'll be 4-7 or something like this. It doesn't matter, man. You're still facing that 12-0 guy. That's what's up. You know what I'm saying? So, in MMA, it's different. It's not, it's hard to get a guy who has 11 fights. They just look at the number of fights you have, I guess is what I mean. At the end of the day, they're going to try to just match you with another guy who has as many fights as you. And whether that guy has, a perfect record or an almost perfect record, you're probably facing a guy who has a lot of fights.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's why I think it's stupid to go out there right away and have a fight super quick and not be already built up with the idea that you're going to have 4, 5, 6 fights.
Yeah.
Because you should be ready for those first 3 fights to be easy as hell, especially if you're at a good gym. Mm-hmm. If you're not at a good gym, and frankly, like losing your first amateur fight, in my opinion, in MMA especially, it better be against a guy who's really, really good. Because in most cases, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
And also, guys, like, I have to say, like, as an amateur, if you first time fighting, if you lose your first fight, it's mentally damaging.
Destroys you.
It destroys you. It does not. It leaves a sour taste in your mouth for the rest of your until you start winning fights again, which is hard to get back and winning fights if you already don't want to fight. You know. So like, I would say train well and prepare well for your first fight, because I feel like that's one of the most, like, it's a stepping stone for the rest of your career, or if you want to take it seriously. So like, I would train well and don't rush it. You know, just a little advice from me.
I mean, there's guys who are fighting for amateur belts in MMA that have 4 fights.
Yeah,
that should give you an idea, right? 25% of your career up to that point is your first fight. You know what I mean? Just for the sake of like understanding like how big your first fight is. So, you know, and the thing is, like, I know amateurs, people are like, well, it's an amateur fight, it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, I promise you, if you lose that fight, it's going to matter to you. And if you win that fight, it's going to matter to you. Yeah. You know, if it doesn't matter that much, then why are you making posts about it on social media? You know?
Right.
And so, yeah, I just think like once you start fighting and once you're into it, there's no backtracking. It's what it is.
Mm-hmm. They say the same for like comedy. Like if you kill your first time, you're always going to remember that and you're always going to be chasing that. But if you bomb, like, you're not going to be as motivated. So
I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit weird. I've always thought about just doing an open mic and purposely bombing because it'd just be funny. I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be fun. I go watch. I'll go watch. Damn, Erik.
Do you feel like you need that? Like it's like an ego check kind of thing?
I like ego checks.
Yeah.
I like ego checks a lot.
I do too.
I think life is, I think it's important. Yeah, I think ego checking is probably one of the most important things in life, personally, because I think it simultaneously humbles you, but also instills confidence. Yeah. You know, yeah. I mean, once stuff like that, like you get embarrassed in front of a crowd of people. You know, going back to the fighting thing, it's almost the exact same. But like comedy, right? You go up in front of people, you say a bunch of stupid things. Nobody likes you. You get yelled at by somebody in the crowd, maybe. Yeah. You know, like get off stage. You know, whatever. And but it's kind of nice because when it's done, you go, yeah, it wasn't that bad. I survived it. Yeah. What was the worst that happened? Some people didn't like me. Right. Who cares? You know?
And if you have like at least somewhat of a strong mindset, you're going to like take the good from it. And like,
I kind of secretly like when people don't like me sometimes.
At least you can be real with yourself.
Yeah. I don't know. Like because it reminds me, like, what is there? There's a term. It's like there's riches in the niches or something like that. Like you're always looking for your niche in life, right? And my niche is teaching what I do, right? It's a very niche thing. You know, it's like there's not like a million MMA gyms. There's not a million MMA coaches. There's not a million whatever. And so this is how I'm going to try to make my money. But I do think that, like, generally speaking, the people who are like really famous are extremely liked by a small group of people and hated by everybody else. Yeah. You know, and you can see this with like, not to get political, but you can see this with like, the Trump effect, or if you want to look at somebody like Kim Kardashian, I mean, you get like a certain group that are like, gee, and you get another group who are like, I love her,
I'll take it down.
And it's all over the place. Yeah. I mean, Kanye West, same relationship there, but like, people like that. I mean, for the most part, the people that you think of as making a lot of money that are very famous and very successful a lot of times aren't liked by, a large amount of people. Yeah. And I would say large as being like, realistically in life, if you are who you are, probably 30% of people aren't going to like you. Yeah. And it has nothing, just period. Yeah. The first time they meet you, they're just going to be like, you're just not for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't like 30% of people I meet. It's probably more than that, frankly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who are annoying and stupid and think dumb things that I have no interest in having conversation with, if I'm honest with you. Yeah. But that's life. You know, you keep moving on. People are allowed to say what they say and think what they think, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's the joy of where we live.
Yeah, that's what makes America great, dude. Like
100%.
you could have those differences with people and still live in the same country. You know what I'm saying? Like,
they could be your neighbor. You know, they could watch your kids. Frankly, shit. I'm really big on that stuff. I think, you know, it's important to understand, like, not everybody's gonna like you in life, and that's okay. We don't have to be, you know, not everybody's gonna be. Again, it's like, you know, it's like what I was saying earlier about that first like time getting like hit really hard, and you have that first like shock. Yeah, I think a lot of people haven't had the verbal version of that in life. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like I think a lot of people haven't had that like that shock of like, hey, fuck you, I don't like you. You know what I'm saying? I don't care. Yeah, just being checked. Like everybody. I got checked a lot when I was a kid. A lot. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I got verbally checked, mentally checked, every version that you can possibly think of, right? Yeah. You know, emotionally, you know, in relationships, outside of relationships, it doesn't matter. So like, I think it's important. Like you have to harden yourself like mentally and physically in all things. And I think that's an important thing in life, you know? And I think if you're not actively seeking to constantly be humbled in some format, you know, or embarrassed. I think embarrassment is good for you occasionally. I think putting yourself out there to be embarrassed is important. I think putting yourself out there to fail is important. Yeah. You know, do you think there's any billionaire out there that doesn't have a failure? I promise you that's not the case. Yeah. You know,
unless more than a lot of people.
Yeah. More than the average person. Yeah. You know I failed. You know how long it took me to open a gym? I tried 3 other times, you know. It wasn't a first time deal. You know, and this, you know, I don't talk about it much, but you know what I mean? It's like, it was, I went through the process with a lot of other people. I mean, realistically, if you want to talk about me actually just even talking to people and having meetings and like going through the processes, it's probably closer to 6, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, it took a while to get to this point. Now, I probably could have done it earlier, sure, you know, and so forth. And that's life, you know. You know, do I wish I had done this when I was 28 instead of 38? Yeah. You know, but
you can't change
you can't change the past. And, you know, not everything's going to be a perfect, like, straight line from, like, success does not look like a straight line on a graph going like this. It just doesn't. You know what I mean? Success looks like this. It's this shaky. You're going to be here sometimes. You're going to be up here sometimes.
But as long as you're gradually going up.
It's just the gradually going up, yeah. It's the overall, you know,
like look stocks. That's what you want.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
No, I feel you on that because, like, I mean, even, like, I'm still in the process of it, but, like, even doing the podcast, I mean, Max knows we've failed so many fucking times with, like, audio just being, like, fucking up, the camera fucking up. Like,
you just do it. You just do it. Like this, I was listening to a podcast about this last night, and people are just like, you know, they call in for these different things. I actually sent Max one of these podcasts, but you know what I mean? Like I was listening to it, and basically the guy's just like, well, you know, I don't know when I should. Do you think I should be at this point before I do blah, blah, blah? And literally the guy in the podcast is like, just do it. Yeah. Just do it. It doesn't matter. You're going to mess up. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with failing. You know what I mean? Failure is the spice of life that makes life enjoyable. Yeah. You know, if everything was success all the time, you wouldn't enjoy it.
Exactly.
You know?
Right. That's yeah.
I mean, why are people who are super rich, like silver spoon in their mouths, the most psychotic people you've ever met in your life? And the reason is because everything's fucking easy. Yeah. And when they get like even the slightest thing that's difficult, it's like, you know, a flat tire for like, you know, some silicone mom, you know what I'm saying, is like the biggest earth-shattering thing on planet Earth. Meanwhile, you know, your crane's getting bombed by Russia. Like, calm the fuck down.
Do you guys want to speak about that? Because I kind of want to. I do want to ask you about that. I mean, so I know with how close Ukraine is to Russia.
Are we talking politics?
I mean, I really want to get into this.
We can. I'm not super informed on this, guys. Just heads up. I'll do my best. But go ahead.
It's not even politics. I mean,
it's your opinion.
Yeah. But I do want to ask you this because it's like, it could be Uzbekistan, you know? Like, obviously.
I mean, here's the thing. What's going on with Russia is, so Putin is a Soviet Union. That's originally what he grew up in, you know? Yeah. To him, that's like his government. That's what he grew up in. And he feels comfortable with it. After, whenever USSR broke up, you know? Putin felt like the country fell apart, you know? So he's like, I know Putin's like in his mind. I'm sure he's thinking like, all right, dude, like I'm gonna die soon. Like he's 69.
That's one thing I think about. Like now, if like we were to go to war and say there was like maybe enough casualties to where they did do a draft, like we'd be fucked, bro. You know, like
I mean, yeah, the United States is a big country. Yeah, I think that's the thing that people forget. I mean, there's 330 million people that live here. You know what I mean? College
dropouts. Prime age, like we're fucked, bro.
I think a lot of. I mean,
I got 2 more years. I'm good.
I think your opinion changes when it's your country. Yeah. I think it's hard to be motivated to, the United States is basically an island, right? Yeah. I think people forget that. Like, even though we are bordered with Canada and Mexico, but like not to sound like this. I mean, Canada's never going to invade us. Mexico's never going to invade us. Yeah. We have such a good relationship with those two countries in so many ways. I mean, outside of obviously like the immigration.
Yeah. I was about to say Mexico already invaded us, bro.
Well, I mean, this. I lived in Arizona. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, the majority of people who from Mexico who move to America think of themselves as American. No, you know what I'm saying? They're, again, what I'm getting at is like they're not like people who like come over from another country and then still think of themselves as the people from that country, which I always thought was, odd. My dad's from Norway, as an example. He doesn't think of himself as Norwegian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
when did he leave?
Pretty young. He was pretty young.
Okay.
Yeah. Young enough he doesn't have an accent.
Yeah.
And but that's kind of where I don't know, in that time period. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's different. If somebody tried to invade the United States, like let's say somebody, bombed, Hawaii or something even. Dude, we'd
smoke them.
We'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Look at what happened last time. Like a group of people that weren't even attached to a country hit a building. Yeah. We're just like, we're going to go to the Middle East. We're going to go to the Middle East for 20 years. It's like, I think, as much as we talk shit on like how soft everybody is and shit and stuff like that nowadays. I mean, the percentages of people you don't even have to have that many hard men in a country when you have 330 million people. Yeah. It only has to be a small percentage,
right?
And you still have a lot of people, and then couple that with the fact that we technologically probably have the best military. I don't think it's not probably, we definitely do, especially if you talk about the Air Force and things of that nature. Have the best military on Earth, and I just don't.
I think about that too.
Us,
You were talking about like the technology and everything, like. Advancements in like technological warfare. Think about that too, because I hear like, 150,000 troops, like, on the border of like Ukraine, like outside or whatever. I'm like, that's just a lot of fucking people, bro. Like, for what?
Bro, I saw a video of Russian troops who were like driving on a road.
Oh yeah, that convoy.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know where I saw it, but like, I saw somebody commented or somebody captioned it saying, what's stopping like the United States to just go straight, bomb it straight? Because they were going all in one line.
I'm sure they have anti-air, like.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can. I don't think you realize. Like, I was okay. So, little backtrack on me. When I was in high school, I thought I was going to join the military. Yeah. I wanted to be I was going to either join the Marines or I was going to be a fighter pilot. Right? The only reason I didn't end up doing those two things or even going towards the military at all was because of martial arts. And one of my friends actually went into the armed forces because 9/11 happened when I was in high school. And he went into the armed forces and he came out. He was ahead of me. And when he came out and back, by the way, guys, recruiters lie. I don't know if you know this. Yeah. Recruiters are liars. But they, basically were like, oh yeah, you'll be able to do all that stuff in the military. You'll definitely be able to, box, kickbox. You'll be able to do all these things. I talked to my friend. And he's like, there's probably no way. He's like, they just fit you where you go. Unless you have like an extreme specialty, you're not going to go where you want. And that's what kept me out. But before that, I was really, really into like, aircraft and things of that. Dude, most of the stuff that they would use first. So the first thing they bring in with the Air Force in most cases are like your stealth bombers and your really high altitude bombers, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to come in and they're trying to wipe out as much as they can before they start bringing in like more low flying aircraft. They would just bomb the hell out of that with like a B-2 or like, a stealth bomber or something like that, or an F-22 or something that has like, stealth capabilities. You know what I mean? And they wouldn't even see it, and they'd be so high up in the air and going so fast. I mean,
dude, those things like build speed. They drop a couple bombs, dude. Yeah. Those build speed as they come down.
So those don't even come down. They just stay at altitude and they smart.
It's so
bomb.
odd.
Yeah. I mean, the bombs are almost airplanes themselves. I think that's what people don't understand. That's why they're so expensive. I mean, these things basically fly to you. You know what I mean? So
that's what I'm saying. Like
they could be like 4 miles away from you and hit you.
Yeah.
I mean, Apaches as an example, like Apache Hellfires can hit you from 2 miles away, and those things don't fly that high.
Yeah.
It's a helicopter.
Insane, dude.
You know what I mean? So like, what can what can a stealth bomber that's basically at altitude where you have to have an oxygen mask on because you're so high up because there's no oxygen. What do you think that's going to hit you from?
It's scary. It's scary. Like the technology, this is one thing I feel like we have, but like nobody knows about. I think I don't remember what year exactly it was, but it might have been like 80s, 90s. There's this like thing, there's a law that like prevented basically like I think it's like satellite like laser technology. It's called like the Star Wars.
The Star Wars program.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Reagan.
I feel like we have that shit.
Star Wars.
Well, I was actually going to make the joke that really what's going to happen next is we're just going to be like doing this. We're almost there, to be honest. Like I think it was I can't remember the airplane. It's like an S some number. It's like S-117 or something like that. But it's the crazy. I think it was the Black Hawk is what it was called, and I'm sure you've seen it. But it's like the one that has the super like long nose, and then it comes out to like 2 points and comes back. And
I know about
you know, and they have it in movies all the time because it's cool as hell looking. That thing flies almost in space. Like it goes up so high that it basically almost breaks the total like
barrier
atmosphere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the only reason they don't use it is so damn expensive. But it's really it's an awesome airplane. It's like you know, engineering genius in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I do really think at some point we're just going to be dropping bombs from space.
Yeah.
Because like, why not? You know what I'm saying?
So fucked. Like the potential damage that could happen.
Well, I just think it turns it into a scenario. I mean, you know, we have satellites. We have spy satellites. You can go over the top of countries and, you know,
look in.
I mean, if you're over the country, you could also bomb it with that, you know. Right. Not saying we should do that, but I'm also saying I think that at some point that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Dude, I think like we can do a lot now that I just feel like we don't because we have certain rules with war that we don't.
Just morals.
Well, it's also escalation.
Yeah.
You know, there's this is going to be corny, but there's a Dr. Seuss book that's really, really good. And it's basically has to do with escalation. And essentially it's like, you know, these neighbors get into an argument. It's been a long time, guys. I'm going to butcher this, but these neighbors get into an argument about something. It's like a fence or it's like the way that the other guy's doing his yard or his house or something. And they just keep one-upping each other. And then it turns into like, he starts like, you know, then he threw like alligators over the fence because it's Dr. Seuss. And then it's like, then he threw, you know, whatever. Like, you know, he brought in a fire truck and sprayed his whole house. And then at the end, like basically the one guy has this little, you know, this little like looks like a M&M, you know what I mean? And he goes, "This will be the final one," and then that's like the end of the thing. Yeah. And basically, it's to kind of show like, you know, at a certain point when you try to destroy the other person so much, you end up just destroying yourself too. Yeah. That's why the collateral damage becomes so high. It's why nuclear weapons are the good example. It's a metaphor for nuclear weapons. Yeah. So
it's crazy. Hopefully, it doesn't get to that point. Yeah. But I do want to ask you if you had any advice for like young men in general. What would you tell them?
I mean, I'm going to sound like a self-help book for here 2 seconds, but, you know, get on your grind, guys. Still focusing on women. That's a big one. If you are young, you really don't need to, you know, young is relative. You know, I would say the thing that people, you know, most people would think that 30 is still young. But to me, young is, you know, if you guys are in high school, you guys are in college, you know, in your early 20s, the worst thing you can possibly do is heavily focus in on women and basically break away from things that are going to make you better. You know, your whole life should be somewhat of an upward trajectory towards goals and things that you want for yourself. If you don't know what those goals are, do things you're interested in. You know, find something you like to do it a lot, get good at it. There's your thing. You know what I mean? But I do think a lot of guys nowadays kind of do this mindset of like, I don't know what to do. I'll get a 9 to 5. I'm going to get a girlfriend. We're going to move in together really quick. We're going to have kids. You know, it's like there's so many like things that you should be doing before that. You know, you should set yourself up for success in life. You should be, you know, investing money as soon as you can. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, guys, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there. But there's also, you can go to places that will help you invest your money for you. And, you know, they'll take a very small, they don't make money unless they make money. That's another thing to remember, guys. You're not paying them, actually. They're literally just taking your money, investing it for you, and then taking a percentage of that investment. So if you don't know what you're doing, do that. You know, be as entrepreneurial as possible. You know, always put yourself out there to do things, guys. You know, and fail. fail hard, you know, and fail publicly. I think that's important. You know, that's the other thing. Everybody can fail by themselves. You know, that sucks. When you fail in front of a group of people, that really sucks, but man, it makes you stronger. And most people appreciate people that try, you know, just in general. You know, if you're always the guy who's like, you know, you've met guys like this where they're just so concerned. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't, you know, so forth. You know, I've been like that in times in my life, believe it or not. So it's like, you know, it's important to put yourself in a position to fail and look stupid, say stupid things, you know, and experiment early and don't get into heavily committed things of any sort in your early 20s. There's no point. You know what I mean? There's very, very few things that you should be like locked into before the age of 25, like just straight up. So.
Yeah. All right, and then anything? Do you have anything?
Just try it. You know, like you said, just try. You know, like you don't know how the future's gonna play out. So, like every time you fail, you don't. Next time you repeat it, you don't come in empty-handed. You have experience of what you did wrong, what you need to do next time. You have an idea what you did. You know what I'm saying? So when you go do it again, you'll do better and better. You just need to succeed one time. So. You know what I'm saying? You can fail many times as you want, but you just have to be successful one time. Then you be set for life. You know what I'm saying?
And then go check out ES MMA. Where can they find you?
We have a website. That's one option. So esmmaandfitness.com is our website. That has our schedule on it. I need to have a little more updated, but it does have our schedule on it. That's an active schedule. We have some photos and stuff on there. That's fine. But if you have social media, that's even better. Facebook, you know, Erik Steenberg is the option. I'm sure you won't know how to spell that. So the other option is ES MMA and Fitness, also on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. So I'm on all of those.
There you go. Yeah. One more question. Do you have like an end goal with this whole thing in mind?
Yeah, I mean, long term, I really want to expand the gym. That'd be the first thing. I don't know if I want to make 2 locations. Generally speaking, like multiple locations isn't necessarily the best thing for a gym. It's usually just easier to get bigger. And then after that, hopefully, I would like to promote fights. I think that it's good to have a fighter promote fights because I think it's, you know, and especially I think I have a relatively good reputation in St. Louis. Maybe not with certain people, but with most people. And you know, I think most fighters would rather fight for somebody else who's fought than fight for somebody who hasn't because they don't really understand it. And, you know, I'm going to understand the issues a little bit more and the matchmaking a little bit more and so forth. But that'd probably be it. And then, you know, my goal is to be retired before I'm 50. I'm definitely on track for that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun.
Good shit.
Dude.
Yo.
That
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you like the podcast, rate 5 stars. Follow us on @TKBO Podcast on Instagram. We just made a TikTok. Follow us on YouTube @the Kickback Lounge Podcast. And, you know, fuck with the boys. Thanks for coming on.
We out.